Legislative Report. I'm your host, Anthony Tezak. Joining me today for a legislative update is State Representative Ryan Mackenzie. Representative, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Anthony.
We're here today to talk about a tax proposal being put forth, and we know that Pennsylvania residents have been struggling with inflation recently. Where are we with that issue as far as solving it?
Yeah, so inflation is a problem that people are dealing with all across the country and have been for a number of years. There are a bunch of different factors that go into inflation, but one thing that is important to note is that inflation is something that compounds over time. And so what that means is every year when you have inflation of 8% and then the next year it's 5%, and even if that number is coming down, the next year it's 2%, those increases are still compounding on top of each other. And so those annual increases all of a sudden amount to higher prices overall. And right now that burden is something that Pennsylvania families are really struggling with. And so the largest contributing factor, and it's been shown in a number of studies, is the overspending in Washington, D.C. When you have too much money coming out of Washington, D.C., that leads to almost the textbook definition of inflation, when you have too many dollars chasing too few goods. And so the other contributing factors were things related to COVID and the war in Ukraine and other things like that that have disrupted the supply chain. But on that monetary side, the single biggest factor, again, many studies have pointed to, is the fact that the overspending in Washington, D.C. and the printing of money is driving our inflation. And so that's something that we have to deal with. Even though we're not in federal government here in Harrisburg, we can do things to try to help ease the burden for Pennsylvania families.
So as you said, if this is a D.C. problem, what can Harrisburg do?
Yeah, so the biggest single thing we can do is actually reduce the tax burden on Pennsylvania families. We only have a couple levers we can play with here in state government. It's a good thing that we have a balanced budget requirement, and we have to meet that every single year. But two of the levers that you're pulling are your taxes. You can raise revenue by increasing your tax rates on certain things, or you can decrease or increase your spending. Those are kind of the two main buckets, and then you can always try to reform programs, which is a great effort, but oftentimes a longer-term process. So in every single year, you're trying to make sure that your spending matches your revenue. But one thing that we can do to help Pennsylvania families is by decreasing the tax rates. And so we went through a pretty significant and extensive process last year to come up with this package of 10 bills that we felt had rates and taxes that were out of whack with the rest of the country. And so we could help ease the burden by reducing and reforming some of those for Pennsylvania families.
Let's go into a little bit more detail. You mentioned that there were 10 bills as part of the package. What are some the more significant bills?
Yeah, so they range from reducing property taxes on homeowners, reducing taxes on the gross receipts tax, which is something that's buried in your electric bill, making sure that lots of products that we need for everyday life are tax exempt from the sales tax, so matching that to the rest of the country. And so in all of these cases, what we did was we went through and we looked at what our rates were and what our taxes were compared to other states around the country. Overall, Pennsylvania has the 21st highest tax burden in the entire country, so we are in the top half. And so we looked at these individual taxes and where could we actually reduce or bring down our rate to be competitive with other states, at the same time help Pennsylvania families. And what we ultimately came up with was over $2.2 billion of taxes that are going to Pennsylvania's general fund every year, so we can negotiate those as a part of our budget package. And if we return those taxes to Pennsylvania families, that would mean about $400 to $500 additional for Pennsylvania families every single year.
You mentioned the package has some exemptions, some credits. Tell us about some of the exemptions.
Yeah, so some of the exemptions are, every state has different things that are taxed or non-taxed with the sales tax. And so what you can do is exempt out certain things in Pennsylvania law. And so some of the things that are state taxes that other states do not are things like cribs and strollers and children's toys, even pet food. And so these are things that for a lot of families are necessities. They need to have these things. They are going to be trying to raise their family. And so we could actually reduce those tax burdens on Pennsylvanians and their families, and that would put us in line with a bunch of other states, but it would also match what we generally try to do with the sales tax of exempting out necessities and taxing things that aren't necessities.
Has the package been introduced yet?
Yeah, so we've introduced all 10 bills. We had a great response last session, and ultimately we actually were able to get one piece of the 10 bill package enacted in last year's budget, which was the tax credit expansion for child and dependent care. So we were able to increase that to match the federal government. So again, that's a good thing, not only if you're trying to raise a family, if you're trying to take care of maybe a family member, those costs can really add up quickly. And so having a credit that goes onto your Pennsylvania state tax bill and helps bring down that state tax burden, that can really help offset some of those costs.
Okay. Representative, what's next steps now?
Yeah, so again, we were fortunate to get one piece of the tax package included in last year's budget. Now we're heading into a new budget season, and so we have an opportunity to go back at all of these bills, the other 9 bills in the package, try to advance them through the legislative process. And the good thing is that we started this conversation last year. So what we're seeing is actually now the Senate and others in the building are starting to take up this cause as well. So the Senate has promoted the 2 pieces of the tax package, the elimination of the gross receipts tax on electric bills, and also bringing down the PIT, the personal income tax. That was something that was raised during the Rendell administration. It was supposed to be temporary, that raise. Of course, that is now stuck around for far longer than anybody thought. So we would like to bring that back down. And all of these things ultimately are about putting money back in people's pockets, helping them with the higher costs and higher prices that they're seeing, and also allowing them to make decisions about where best to utilize their funds in their budgeting process.
Some may say that we can't afford a tax break right now, but does the surplus show that that's not the case?
Yeah, so what we see is that in state government, the way that you generate most of your revenue is through the sales tax and the income tax. And so when prices do go up, that means more dollars are coming into state government. So we have seen a surplus of funding coming into the state. And so again, the way that we feel we can offset the higher taxes that are being paid on those higher priced goods is by reducing the tax rates on Pennsylvania families. And so we think this would be a great way to return that money to these people that are dealing with the struggling prices in all of our economy. And really it's something that, I'll share a personal story where, my wife and I, we go to the grocery store every week, and we have had to make decisions and changing the way our buying behavior is based on prices that we see in the store. And I think we're not like anybody or dislike anybody else where we go and we see the prices on things and you have sticker shock on things that you are accustomed to buying at a certain price. And now it's significantly more expensive than it was just a few years ago. And you have to reevaluate a lot of your decisions nowadays. And it's a really unfortunate situation for a lot of people. And so we want to try to help them out.
You recently put forward another proposal, the Keystone First Responder Award. Tell us, what is the award and who's eligible for it?
Yeah, so this is a great example of what we do in state government, looking around at what other states are doing. So this idea was first brought to my attention by a legislator in Tennessee that I met at a Council of State Government conference. She mentioned that she had advanced some legislation to recognize fallen first responders in her state, and that it was something that was being replicated in other states. And I thought that was a great idea. We want to honor and recognize those first responders. In this case, it's individuals that have either died in the line of duty or suffered a career-ending injury. And there are already a lot of different recognitions that go on throughout the year. There might be a memorial service or different recognition, but there is not a proper and official state designation that can be awarded and bestowed upon that person. And so that, I think, is a good thing, a good improvement, so that we can really recognize all of these individuals, have a proper recognition. So this legislation not only establishes the Keystone First Responder Award, also puts together the board with representation from all of the different first responder communities out there, and then lays out the specific criteria for which somebody could receive this award. And it does actually also, I think should be noted, it has a 3-year look back. That's in line with our state death benefits criteria for first responders. And so we will be able to recognize recent individuals who have passed away. Obviously, I'd be open to more, but I think this is a great way to start is with those individuals that have recently passed, and then we'll be able to recognize those individuals in the coming year, and then we'll get up to speed, and we can hopefully also even eventually start working on the backlog as well, so that all first responders who have given so much to our state are properly recognized for their sacrifice.
It sounds like a fantastic idea. What's the reception been on the floor?
I think we worked with all of the stakeholders, fire, EMS, police, everybody in the stakeholder community was brought in on this legislative process, and thankfully it has moved through that process with unanimous agreement from all of our stakeholder allies and supporters in the first responder community, and we have a great piece of legislation here which is going to recognize our fallen heroes and those that had a career-ending injury while serving our state.
And they definitely deserve to be honored.
100%.
Anything else you'd like to discuss? We're getting ready to get in the thick of budget season.
Absolutely. So look, I think these are some great things that we can do in state government. We have 2 other areas that I'm going to continue to work on as we head into the budget and close out the rest of the session. I've introduced a package of legislation to deal with the negative effects and impacts of illegal immigration and what it's doing to people here in Pennsylvania. So there's a package of bills that I've introduced on that topic. One thing that we can do is expand the use of E-Verify here in Pennsylvania to require all public contractors, state and other government entities, to use E-Verify to verify that the employees and contractors, subcontractors that are being paid with taxpayer dollars are either legal U.S. citizens or legally authorized here to work in our country. So that's an important thing to protect taxpayer dollars and American jobs at the same time. And then the other issue which I'm passionate about and we've been working on in a bipartisan fashion is maternal health care and expanding ways that we can help prevent maternal mortality and morbidity. And so I introduced legislation a number of years ago that would study that issue. The panel has now been up and running for a couple of years, and they're coming back with recommendations. And we've been actually able to introduce legislation and make reforms on that front. So all good stuff, and just have to continue the hard work of governing in a bipartisan fashion here in Harrisburg.
All right, Representative, thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy.
Thank you.
But we look forward to having you back to discuss the budget and other things that come up.
Look forward to seeing you.
That's all the time we have for today's program. If you have any questions about what you've just seen or any other state government-related topics, Representative Mackenzie's contact information will be on the screen in just a moment. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.